Welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thanks so much for joining me. In this episode, I want to talk just about regarding the backline. In other words, I've got two continuous train lines that are running. So I've got this dog bone configuration with a loop here and a loop down there. So as it goes around, the train has to come back in the other direction. And in which case, what I would like to have done is to just keep it all on the same level, and we don't have any problems with locomotives going up an incline or with the couplers trying to line up as they're coming down. But to add a bit more interest, we've gone to the effort of raising it up. Not by a considerable amount, we've only just come up by a height of this timber and the plywood. I haven't modified or done anything different, it's just the size of what it is, we've attached it and away we go. The reason I've done it is just to create, while the most part of this backline will be pretty inconspicuous in the sense that there'll just be literally the landscape, countryside, or retaining walls or what have you there. It's not going to be necessarily, in most parts, any tunnel situation where you don't see it. If you're tall like me, you'll be able to stand over there and look back there and see it. So there could be some scenery here, but you can access it. And I guess the point is we can come along and keep the track cleaned and maintained. If there's a problem, we can just get to it. So I'm absolutely fine with that. And as you can see, this is the longest part of the layout. This is where we're now going to start building the feature, which, as you can see in this picture, is of course of a country-styled railway station, as popularized in one of our all-time favorite TV shows, of course. So what we're going to do with this backline, and what I'm up to, and I wanted to point this out now as we're constructing it in bits and pieces, is first of all, you'll notice these little notches that are open here that I've discussed before, is where I drop in some feeder wires or what have you. And if I ever need to access it, I could leave a section of landscape, wall, or maybe a mountain or whatever it is, but have it so I could just literally remove it, get in there if something ever needed to happen, because we've got to forward think where we can. The other thing is though, while we're not going to see a lot of this backline, there's just a few little sections I want to open up just to give a bit of a different visual perspective to. I've got the Smith's Chips factory that we're going to have a sort of a loading bay, which will just sort of open up as a window as you see the locomotive pass by. And we're going to see it reappear here on the overpass. And I've also cut this section together here, and if we have a look in this picture, you'll see I've also just notched it out a little bit. The next thing is we need to create a bridge for this. So what I've decided to go with, I want to go with the traditional girder plate style overpass, bit industrial, bit common, seen everywhere in probably every single country. But the concept was that rather than building the kit up and making it like that, for continuity, I have decided that I really only need bits of the kit. And then why I taped it and shaped it like this is the whole idea is, we'll get our hook down and we're going to pretty it all up, but basically that's it. For no other reason than this just keeps a nice, clean line for the train line to go. It's all about practicality in this sense. So we'll fake up the look with the scenery to make it look like that and go from there. So what are we actually going to see here? Well, as you saw in that picture, there would be a station all about here. Then there's going to be this roadway that's going to come through. Regional sort of thing. I also don't want to overdevelop the roadway too much. From regional areas where I'm from in South Australia, there's a lot of railway crossings and sections that there are no automatic boom gates and lots of concrete and lots of development. It's pretty much just the dirt and there's the tracks coming through. It's practical, it works, and you all know what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do, I want to keep that vibe going and keep it nice with an empty track running down here and just the two main lines, signposted of course, but not with the boom gates per se. And then you'd obviously just have a little car or something where obviously cars would go under and carry on through that road. Why I've got this video going is you'll notice I've just put a couple of little scrap bits of timber in here. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is, and the whole idea why I've sort of done it in this section like this, is to get under, obviously what we're going to do is we're going to paint this grey, I imagine, in here, and I'll probably get some brick or stone card type of stuff to put on to make it look like what we all see in these situations. Well, here we are. We have the backline ready to happen now. We're laying the cork down as we speak. And I'll just bring you in here just for a second. You'll just notice I've popped a little bit of grey paint here. These are the little sections we're going to use to insert some LEDs, or it may go overhead, that we can slide into position and lock in there. The other thing as well, just briefly, I don't know if the camera will see it, but I'm sure it will. If I lift it, you'll just see we've got some neat holes to feed that through. This will probably be the only section, well probably, actually, yes, the only section of track that we'll have that won't easily be accessible with the dropper wires if necessary. Again, the idea is I can actually lift this up because where the next one joins, they're still going to be independent, so I can always lift and shimmy as necessary. At the moment, we have the track. I'm just laying the track coming around the curves now, ready to come out. As you can see by our wonderful soda cans, we have the track being weighted down as we're going to come around and those back ones. Now these tracks are going to come through before we start to work on the next section. I want to just touch briefly on scenery because we're going to come back into this well down the track. But I want to take mention of this now in some ideas. This is the key section we're going to be focusing on. And as I said, while we've got these glimpses of windows of opportunity where really all you're going to see with this part of this line in this section here is probably this much. The rest we don't want to see. Again, we're not going to build it up and have a tunnel or anything like that. There'll be a backdrop coming up to maybe about this sort of height that I can put my hand in, clean the track. I guess that's a key thing I want to come back to about the simplicity. I want the operation to be clean, organized, and simple. It's not a complicated layout. It's a scenic layout. And so that brings me just briefly to landscaping. I've ummed and ahed about this. It's not going anywhere. We're not moving the installation. I did think about actually building modules, a 90-degree, if you like, 90-degree section where you landscape into modules, slot them in, and they sit there. That's a good idea. Maybe I might do that. I'm not too sure just yet. What I did want to say, though, is during this time, certainly when I'm not working on the layout, or living the rest of my life, I'm carefully researching, studying landscaping techniques and starting to acquire some of the materials that we're going to need, because building a model railway beyond 2020 has become an interesting thing for two reasons. One, logistically, it's been challenging getting parts. I think we can all attest to that. The logistics chain has been broken somewhat due to world events. But then the other thing is woodland scenics. There's some few materials I'm looking at that I'd like to start to think about laying down as we're in construction now. It'll make it a bit easier. But I need to make sure I get the right pieces. Again, I don't have easy access to a comprehensive model shop nearby that has Tamiya, Humbrol, Woodland Scenics, all those sort of brands that we know and love. So I'm going to have to take a bit of a gamble. Now, I used a few in the past, so I have a few and I know kind of what I'm doing. And any more than when I built the model airport, there's a few materials. I know what we need, so it gives me a pretty good gauge on colours of grass. But a top tip and a wise investment is that while you can research all of this stuff online and you can download a free PDF of their catalogue or sales brochure, it's not quite the same as thumbing through it, marking it out, comparing the colours. Oh yes, this goes with that, that'll work well. Mark the product code, and then simply pop it into your supplier or purchase online and get what you need. And tremendous bonus codes and discounts can be obtained, and great deals on the freight. But unlike it used to be, where we used to just get these little brochures and books from our local suppliers and pay a few dollars, I'm going to need to purchase the latest Woodland Scenics one. And the great news is that even in Australia and even with postage, it's the same cost as what we would see in the USA. That's fantastic. Yes, I'm going to have to wait for that to arrive, but what I want to say is I think that is, like many other resources we use, one of the Bibles you need when you're building a model railway to do your research. To haphazardly order some things online, because as I've always said, model railwaying can get quite expensive exceptionally quickly. Do take a moment to think ahead, and I think if you've got the brochure and you can thumb through and look at it all at once, it's a lot easier to digest than trying to sift through. Maybe you're very good with your e-readers and your tablets and iPads and all the alike. For me, it's kind of like a model railway magazine. Nothing is more engaging than holding it in my hands and drinking it in. The same thing on my other channel with hi-fi. There's something about a connection to the artist and having a vinyl LP album, and there's something about it. There's something so symbolic about taking it, putting it on, and popping the stylus on and hearing it. You've made the commitment and the effort, and you get handsomely rewarded. Another note, I've got a little surprise locomotive that I've put on order. But I like to just say this because it won't be shipping for another year and a half. I hopefully have a layout to plonk it onto so we can see it in action. But the pre-orders opened up just a while ago and they're expecting a year and a half until we see it. So once again, this is a great example about take your time and look at what's happening and try and get in early with what you can. That's why we're coming back quickly to landscaping. Two of my biggest influences when it comes to landscaping have got to be Luke Towan from Boulder Creek Railroad, a fellow Australian here who, if you've ever taken a minute to look at some of his videos, demonstrations, models, dioramas. I mean, it's not always just model railway. He's built various different applications and created some absolutely, truly realistic scenes. And all of them can be cross-related to one to the other. I think one of the best things about it is his ability that, with what he does, is that he's getting access to some fantastic materials. There are also companies that are obviously sending him samples and things like that to play with. And still a lot of stuff he just does himself, including dirt that he'll dig up from his own garden to create that exact effect. So it's very down to earth. The great thing about watching any of his videos, unlike my SNOOZE-FESTs, is the fact that the camera angles or shots keep changing within every 5 seconds. And it's one of those things where even when you look at one video and you really just want to see the start and then get to the end, you never actually fast forward. It sucks you in and you are hypnotized by the process of what he's doing. And he's been experimenting with various different paints, so that for someone like me, instantly when he's saying something like Vallejo Combat Black or Vallejo Rust, the particular products he's using and what he's trying to do is exactly what I'm doing. So I can fast forward trying to experiment and wasting a lot of money with different paints and products and just go straight to the source, including where we're going to get to with doing this overpass. The other person I'd like to make a mention of is Bob Ross, a TV show you may have seen in the 80s called The Joy of Painting, for those of you that may have been privileged to see that. This is so fascinating. If we just having a look at an example, here's where he rolls off with blank canvas, and within that 20-30 minute episode, he's ended up with this. His whole approach to the whole building and painting with him, which was the whole idea, you buy his paints and whatever. He's using a small collection of colors on any one piece and makes it just seem so simple. Happy mistakes along the way. There is no mistake. It's his soothing, calming voice. There's something about it, but it's his approach and his imagination. And I think more than anything, it's the passion that comes across in it, which is, when we're doing something like this, is what we love to do. And it really comes across. And some of his techniques and styles where often we overanalyze and think of something, he makes a mark, does something, and as you and I are the viewer and sitting a few feet away from the television set, it looks pretty good. And I think that's the key thing. Luke Towan refers to it a lot as well, is the idea you need to sort of be back a few feet, and all of a sudden what seems to be a little bit of a mess of what you're creating starts to make a lot of sense, particularly with trees. So in my case, what I'm envisioning for the most part, talking about the backline only here, forget about what's happening in the feature, is that we'll probably be using a series of styrofoam and some sculptor mold to just shape down and create that nice shoulder down here. I think it's probably the universal way to be doing what I'd like to be doing. And then as soon as I've got that Woodland Scenics brochure and I've already marked out some of the static grasses and ground covers and things I want to be experimenting with, especially in this feature area where the station is going to be, with the roadway and those particular tracks where I'm trying to create a more lighter type of ground cover, where the rest of the ballast and what's going to happen on the layout will be pretty atypical, your greys and greens everywhere that you see around the English countryside. Always thinking outside of the box. And here we are today with a pretty cheap and cheerful product called Magic Sand for a few dollars you can get. Why am I pointing this out? I suppose if we open this up and pull out this little sculpture piece you can use, a pyramid, and you just plunge it into the sand, you get this beautiful upside down pyramid, or you put it the other way. My theory was you could use some plaster of Paris and create some nice molds with it, I imagine. So anyway, just a different approach to a simple idea. And just as we're testing that backline here with the viaduct, making sure the coaches don't touch as they pass, if you look carefully down at the bottom bit on the main bit, they do look a bit close together. So much so, I've stuffed up. Right, so coming into shot now, you can see we've got our beautiful one-piece backline section that we had already cut and got ready to use. But because we won't fit enough locomotives in that siding as predicted, we need to bring everything up. So we're going to make a necessary cut here and just a little bit further up here. So we're losing probably the good part of probably 50 to 60 centimeters. So just in respect to doing this cut, one thing that I would recommend, what I love about this particular blade and saw combo I'm using, is I can cut easily exactly to the 1 millimeter mark. But since we've already got the cork down, and I don't see there's going to be a big problem with cutting and then joining back up, is when you do it, what we want to do is we don't want to splinter and do too much damage. So as a result, I would recommend using some of this painter's tape or something. You do it a lot when you're cutting something that's been painted. You minimize a lot of the chips and flecks that might sort of be coming off. So let's get that taped up. And always remember, safety first. Right, now as a result, you can see if we bring this little section closer to the camera, you can see how magnificently smooth we've got that cut with the cork. I mean, it's just some cork, it's not really a big deal, but if it saves me a bit of time and keeps for a bit of a consistent bit of consistency, who's to argue with that? And there we go. So now let's go pop it back on the layout and see where we've ended up. We're back from the chop shop now. So here's our lovely trimmed up pieces and the original piece which I've slid straight back into position. And if you look to the far left of the camera, or to the screen, sorry, you should just see that little bit of red of the curved viaduct coming onto the layout there. So I've got you on the wide angle so we can capture exactly what's happening. So that bit was fine. We made our cut. And as you can see, here was where the roadway was, where we cut it and got a little bit of a dip. I'm going to have to abandon that. I'm not going to recut that board again, but that's not the end of the world. So then what we ended up with is with our two pieces here. So here's our original section we've just chopped out, to which we'll put to the side for a moment. And here's where our overpass is. And as you can see, that's just going to slot in nicely over here. We'll just have to do a little bit of clean up there. And waste not, want not, because there's nothing wrong with the piece we cut out. We'll just swap that around and then add that here, and we'll carry on as necessary. So why have we done all this, and why did we have to stuff around with it? Well, it's rather simple. What has happened in this situation is that when I had the original roadway here, it meant that using our streamlined large radius points, I was literally going to start my turning off here for a siding happening here. And if we can just look down the layout to where this Dremel tool is, here would be roughly where the other one would be. So by the time it's come through and there's a couple of other tricky little bits of point work happening to go other places, I've only got a siding that is, call it maybe a meter or whatever. What it means is I'm only going to be getting about 1, 2, 3 coaches and a locomotive or thereabouts. And it really brings you to the perspective when you watch these YouTube videos where people comment on some layouts saying it's amazing seeing nice long trains. In other words, a real consist of trains on a model railway, because you do need room, and you see those beautiful big sweeping bends and things like that. And if I was doing N scale, I would have had a great time doing it. But I do love the detail I can see, particularly as I get older, that I can see in the HO00 world. So what it means is that to try and keep it a better flow, because the station would have been sitting about here, what we've decided to do is bring everything up effectively another meter and have it up here. And in which case then our point would be happening about here. Now, that's still not that much bigger, but I'm still going to be able to get probably 6 coaches and a locomotive or thereabouts on there. And particularly when it comes to the with the goods wagons and freight and things like that, which is usually sometimes the thing that's going to be put to the side, that's going to have a bit of a better flow. You can already see as a result, I've just rudimentarily started to re-alter the entry points coming in with the main lines because we obviously had to bring it back so these angles won't be as sweeping. I'm a little disappointed I lost some space over here. Anytime you're building this, you quickly realize you never do have enough space. Even with my own room here, an extra meter here and there makes all the difference, but these are the confines that we have to be realistic with. What's going to happen down on this empty section of the board, I'm probably going to keep the roadway going where it crosses effectively 2 lines, and what you'll see here and on this side will be an older line that will have covered up in vegetation and weeds and things, a derelict line that's not even used anymore, something of a yesteryear age that might have used to have been there, and something pretty common we see in many places. So that's our plan of attack now. I don't think it's really too bad. We'll quickly correct all this up as necessary. The other thing is, down the other end, just after the siding has happened and we come back to just a 2-line configuration, I plan on making another cut to the board down there to create basically a stormwater drain type of feature there. The sort of murky water shopping trolley in there, not that we'll probably have that, but just that kind of where the water's going to run off into a catchment area and travel further down. The industrial yard that we all sort of expect to see at that part of a layout. So that's the plan of attack we've got to do now. So we're going to recorrect all this back section up now. Well, that now concludes this video on doing the backline. So as you can see, we're about 50% through. We had a whoopsie here, we moved it up to here, and now we need to start down onto the feature part. We may come back and have a part 2 about the backline when we get to the next corner. But as you can see, all we're going to keep doing is carrying on cork track, cork track. Here we have a coach ready to go. It's a nice operation, ready to keep going. Very happy. In the upcoming videos, we're now going to start organizing the feature part of the layout now. The other thing we need to make mention of as well is, now that we've got those exact measurements, and if you just have a look in this next series of footage, you can see we're now just making sure that our loops, which we knew were going to fit, and we have the key markings here on the table, so I know where the curves have to start and stop. That way, when it comes to the feature part, I know where our lead tracks are coming in and going out. Of course, as a result, since we did have to move this crossing up, which will now be located here, we had to take our scraper and scrape the cork off, and the track will now just gently come in. Look, we'll talk more about that as we talk about creating that main feature. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Toodles.